Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Bali. A warm welcome to our annual Vrijdenkers Festival, a festival that we organize in collaboration with the gemeente Amsterdam, the municipality of Amsterdam, in anticipation of their 750th anniversary. This year, our theme is Tegen de macht, against power, or speaking truth to power. And in this festival, we invite activists, journalists, dissidents who speak truth to power. Tonight, I will speak with 4 distinguished guests about press freedom, privacy, surveillance, democracy, and the future of journalism. The 21st century made our lives increasingly digital. So journalism has also become more and more digital. A part that gives journalists powerful tools that were not available before. It also gives states tools to surveil and oppress journalists and free speech. Last year, the world was shocked by the discovery of the Pegasus spyware, a piece of software that infiltrated smartphones of journalists, human rights defenders, activists, and politicians, through which the data of their microphones, cameras, messages, and all other data on their phones was leaked to governments and secret services. A threat to freedom of speech, freedom of press, and a threat to our democracy. Can journalists still do their work freely if they know that they're being followed? And how are on- and offline safety connected? What does that mean for press freedom? And do journalists self-censor? Again, a warm welcome to the Bali and a warm welcome to Persvrijheid of zelfcensuur.
What we have is list of phone numbers that were targeted, and you were among them.
And what does that program do?
It's transmitting your messages, your images, just everything that's happened on your phone.
Shit.
Your phone was compromised.
They send an attack, steal a bunch of data. The moment they do it, the phone is compromised. They can exfiltrate whatever they want. It's just pretty much automatic.
We have access to a lot of information about a massive surveillance campaign all over the world. That's exclusive materials. It's about who is spying on who in many countries.
Journalist Jamal Khashoggi was killed inside their consulate in Istanbul.
His close friends were surveilled after the murder.
Es la constatación de un espionaje planetario, de un gran crimen mundial. Es una bomba atómica.
Yes, that was the video on Pegasus. It's a great honor for me to invite to the table a very distinguished journalist from Czech Republic, Pavla Holcová. She's an investigative journalist and regional editor for Central Europe at the OCCRP and won numerous prizes for her stories on crime and corruption in European governments. Can I have a warm welcome for Pavla? And then we have another very special guest tonight, and his name is Szabolcs Panyi, a foremost investigative journalist from Hungary, nominated twice for the European Press Prize, and he works for the Hungarian platform Direct36.hu. And Panyi writes mostly on corruption, national security, and high-level diplomacy in Hungary. Also a warm welcome for... Maybe first, how do you pronounce Direct36 in Hungarian?
Direct36.
Okay, this was never gonna...
36, that's the call number of Hungary. So
okay, yeah, that was never gonna leave my mouth fluently. Welcome both, thank you for being here. We've been seeing this video of Forbidden Stories, a French journalist organization who broke the news. They couldn't be here tonight, but you guys could be here, so that's very nice. Maybe, Pavla, first to you. What is the Pegasus project, and how did Forbidden Stories find out about Pegasus?
Well, how did they find out? You need to ask them. I was invited at a later stage to join the project, and the project is centered on a data that are actually showing how different governments of different states around the globe used spyware that's infiltrating the phone and sending back to those who are running the operation every information what you are doing on your phone, including encrypted messages, including what pin you type when you unlock your phone, including turn it on and off your cam or microphone when you are in a room they want to listen in.
Okay, so you said encrypted messaging, so applications like Signal and Telegram are not safe from Pegasus?
No, because they actually see what you see. It's they take full control of your phone, so at the moment you unlock Signal, they can read the messages as easily as you do.
Yeah, and Szabolcs, you were a victim of Pegasus. On what story or what stories were you working when you were followed?
I was surveilled back in 2019 from April to November that year, and in that almost 7 months time span, I was working on at least like 5 or 6 stories. I could guess that it was a story about a Russian institution that was relocating. It's a bank which was relocating its headquarters from Moscow to Budapest. Actually, we were working on this story together with our great Czech colleagues. And basically the core of the story was that the Hungarian government was inviting this very shady Russian institution that was dubbed as a spy bank to Budapest. And when I was working on this story, when I was having meetings with some sources, that's when my surveillance started. But it was not the Russian government that was surveilling me, but the Hungarian.
Okay, so your own government was surveilling. And have any of your sources been compromised due to the surveillance?
Well, it's very hard to tell because I was told almost 2 years later that I was under surveillance. And I tried to reverse engineer what happened to my sources and what happened to the stories that I was working on. There were a couple of people who just stopped contacting me back in those days. So I don't know still if it was connected to the surveillance or not. I'm pretty sure that my government was mostly interested in finding out who are my sources and trying through different means to convince them not to contact me and not to give me information about corruption or abuses of power.
Yeah, and how did you find out that it was your own government that was spying on you?
Well, as Pavla said, that there are different clients of NSO Group. That's the company that manufactures Pegasus, and we actually didn't know who's the actual operator of the spyware. We could guess, and through circumstantial evidence, when we published the pieces, we were pretty sure already that it was the Hungarian government because all the targets that were identified as Hungarian targets, they were only interesting to the Hungarian government, to no one else. I mean, and later on, my own government did say that yes, it was them. After a couple of months of hesitation and no comment strategy, we cannot comment because it's confidential. So after a couple of months of that, they finally acknowledged that it was them. But they also added that every surveillance was lawful. So I was a legitimate target of surveillance according to them.
Yeah. Is that what happened afterwards? So they said you were a legitimate target. So I guess they did not repay you any reparation fees or anything like that?
No, we're nowhere near that. Currently, of course, I'm suing the government, but first I just want to have basic information about when, why, who initiated my surveillance, on what grounds. So I really want to have just very basic facts, but even to get those, I have to go to court.
Yeah, so this is still all very unclear.
Yes.
Yeah, and is this also what you try to uncover with the Pegasus project investigation? Because how does this investigation work? What can I explain to me?
Just imagine a group of people and bunch of phone numbers, and this group of people is asked to bring as many stories as possible based on the phone numbers and some basic knowledge about the spying software. And I was sent to Mexico to work with my Mexican colleague on the Mexican stories. Mexico was quite important in the story because it was like this Petri dish, like really testing country for Pegasus software. They started to deploy this spying software even in 2015, the first cases. And they somehow get a better price. Well, actually, this is important to say, this software is installed on your phone without the need of you doing anything. You don't need to click on any link. You don't need to, get any kind of a, like confirming message or anything. It's just there and you don't know it. And it's so smart, but it also means it's quite expensive to send to someone's phone or to make someone target, and each attack or each taking control over someone's phone is quite expensive. So in Mexico, it was probably like this discount when you have over 100 numbers, you have 10 for free, something like this. So there were many stories, and one of the story that was shocking for me and has some kind of an update recently is a story of 49 students who disappeared, and their bodies were never found. It's so-called Caso Ayotzinapa.
Yeah. It was in 2015 or something.
Yes,
right?
It was in 2015, and those were students of they just want to be teachers because in the region where they are from, mostly Guerrero, you can be narco or you can be teacher. There's not many other possibilities. And those decided they are going to be teachers. And they have this tradition of, once in a year they kidnap a bus and go to the protests in Mexico City. And this time, it seems they kidnapped the wrong bus that was loaded with drugs and was, supposed to head to US. And they were stopped by the police. They were kidnapped to the police, taken to the military barracks, and then they were handed over to cartels, and cartels killed them all. But their bodies were never found, and the government made this like charade when they were actually planting evidence, explaining, the cartels, those people admitted that they killed those kids, and, we have those 7 guys in jail, and they said they confessed. All those guys were tortured, so it's not really what happened, their confession. But we found out that Pegasus was actually put on the phones of the parents of those killed students. And, for me, this was a shocking situation when we started to talk to those parents, and then you
so it was placed by the Mexican government? By
Mexican government, because they were afraid that the families can unite and create some kind of a opposition to the government, and became activists, what they became, because no one told them what happened to their kids. And they believed they could be still alive. But, those are parents who are very, very poor. They earn something like $20 per month, and the government invested thousands and thousands of dollars just to put the software on their phones. And, I visited one father, and I made interview with him, and he was one of the targets. And, he was in this...
Did you know by then that he was a target?
Yes, I knew by then. And, I visited him, and we talked, and he was in this half-collapsed, burned wooden house, living like 7 people in a very tiny place, and we talk how he's earning money, and he said, I'm just, bringing the bottled water from shop to the households. And I can earn up to $20 per month. It's a good money, and we have potatoes here, and sometimes I work on construction sites, so this is additional money. And he was one of the lucky ones because, they told him they found a body of his son, that they confirmed that his son was murdered and his body was burned. And he said, they told me they found the body, but I only got this tiny piece of a bone. So I don't know what to do. Should I pay for the mass at the church to bury this tiny piece of a bone? Is it really my son? How could I know, know? So it was like really moving story, like really of someone who is just trying to live the life.
Yeah.
And the super powerful federal government of Mexico spending like millions of dollars on following these people who just, don't know if they are going to survive another day.
Yeah. And
sorry.
No, it's fine.
You're the victim.
Szabolcs, have you? Because this is a very gruesome story of people being murdered. Did you had any physical threats due to your civilians?
The case of Hungary was fortunately very different. So I myself, I didn't feel any kind of direct threat or pressure, nothing like that. Hungary is still a member of the European Union, which means that our government, led by Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, is still required to act in a civilized manner. So these methods are not viable in Hungary for our government. What they want to do is that they are doing the dirty things in secret. That's why a spyware like Pegasus comes handy. And what happened in Hungary is that we identified at least 6 journalists, including myself and my immediate colleague working at Direct 36, who were surveilled with this spyware. Basically, these targets, including myself, we all worked on stories that were sensitive to the government. As I said, in my case, they were after my sources probably, and this applies to the other people as well. Then we identified 3 businessmen who own media companies, or used to own media companies, and these are all or were employers of journalists who did independent work or who did journalism that was very critical of Viktor Orbán's government. So that the tally is now 9, but of course these media company owners were employing many more journalists.
Yeah.
And then we had at least 10 lawyers, including the most senior lawyer of the country, the head of the Bar Association. We had opposition politicians and even government officials of Viktor Orbán's own government. So it's a very diverse group of people, and each case was very different. So in some cases there were consequences. For example, when a government official had a debate with his superiors over a Russian project, and this government official was basically trying to defend the Hungarian interest against the Russian interest. After this guy was surveilled, he was fired.
Okay.
So we could see what were the consequences here, but again, it's nothing like in Mexico or in Azerbaijan or in Morocco. We see different patterns in every country. There's a systematic abuse of Pegasus, just that the governments have different different way of being corrupt and different way of abusing it. Some can tie the use of surveillance with using force or even murder. Some can only use the force that they have as employers, as the state, to fire people.
Yeah, and how many countries have been affected by? Is there a number?
I don't know. Probably many more than we know about.
Yeah. I think we wrote about 10 or a dozen or something like that.
Yeah, but
there are many more.
Yeah. And speaking of the situation in Hungary, you already said it's an EU government. How is the situation currently regarding press freedom in Hungary?
Well, we're not performing well in all these press freedom indexes. I would say that the biggest problem is that in these past 11 or 12 years since Viktor Orbán took power, he was very successful in transforming the country's media industry. And surveilling journalists is only like the latest phase. It could have started around the mid-2010s, but this was just one method. Usually the Hungarian government is not trying to kill journalists. There's no need for it. They are trying to kill the media outlets. One usual scheme is that the Hungarian government, through state-owned banks, they give loans to so-called independent businessmen who are just proxies fronting for the government, who use this state money to buy up the struggling media outlets and then fire the journalists and turn these outlets into propaganda. And currently, basically, there's a cabinet member, a minister working for Mr. Viktor Orbán, who's in charge of coordinating the messages, the slogans that this right-wing pro-government media empire is disseminating.
And how many independent media outlets are there still left in Hungary?
Usually, you find independent reporting, especially investigative reporting, online. There are probably like 4 medium-sized independent news sites. There are 2 investigative NGOs, and there are a couple of smaller outlets. Problem is that we can only reach people who live in Budapest, the capital, or some larger cities with universities. But basically, there's a firewall between urban and rural Hungary. And for example, my story never makes it to the average news consumption of someone living in a small town voting for the prime minister.
And why is that? Because they don't have internet connection, or
they do have, but they usually consume news through state-owned media, print media, radio, TV, and all of those are controlled by the government. For example, every local newspaper, every county newspaper is owned by the same pro-government group.
Yeah, that doesn't make for a very free landscape, would you say? How is that in the Czech Republic?
Oh, you know, our former prime minister, he's owner of the biggest media house. You know, he's like, you know, having this state attitude towards media he owns, but he's former now. So we are going maybe a few degrees up in the in scaling the freedom of the press.
Yeah, and has there been a reaction from the European Union on this scandal?
Well, of course, and Hungary was just the first country from the European Union that was hit by this scandal. I think the Pegasus project only covered Hungary out of the European Union member states that were abusing.
France?
That were abusing.
Okay.
Of course, there were other very high-level victims of surveillance or targets of surveillance, such as Emmanuel Macron or Charles Michel, but they were targeted by non-European countries, Morocco mostly, I think. Then after the Hungary case, it turned out that Poland was also abusing Pegasus against political opponents of the government, prosecutors, activists. Then came the very peculiar case of Spain, where first it turned out that the whole leadership and former leadership of the Catalan region were surveilled. Then it also turned out that the current prime minister and the minister of defense, as far as I remember, were surveilled with Pegasus.
By the Spanish government?
Yes, the Spanish government, the national Spanish government. And now we have the latest case, which is not with Pegasus, but another spyware called Predator, manufactured by another Israeli company called Citrix. So this tool was used in Greece to spy on one of the leaders of the opposition and on some journalists. So currently there is an investigation done by the European Parliament's special inquiry committee called the PEGA committee. They are writing a report on this. They are having field trips to all these countries and they're gonna come up with some conclusions. The problem is that in order to have joint EU action against what happened, you need basically unanimous decisions. You need the vote of Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, you need the vote of Mr. Morawiecki from Poland. So the exact same people whose government was using and abusing this tool.
Yeah, so that's maybe not the best route to end this. Did it change the way you did your work as an investigative journalist?
Of course, but even before Pegasus, I tried to be as cautious as possible with my communications. One of the reasons why I came under surveillance and why certain other journalists did not was that, as Pavla said, one of the specialties of Pegasus is that it can crack end-to-end encrypted messaging applications. If journalists are not using it, they are using, like, for example, just simple emails or non-encrypted messaging applications, there's no need for Pegasus because probably there's some other cheaper technology out there that can be used to spy on them. In my case and in the case of the other journalists and media company owners, what's common in us is that we were using Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp to have more sensitive discussions about topics. So, I mean, I did make that mistake that to some extent I did trust these applications. Mm-hmm. So one of the changes is that I try to rely more on very old school, almost like spy movie-like methods, like meeting people in a park, making sure there are no surveillance cameras around, or if I'm talking with my boss, we put the phones in not in the fridge, but in a different room, in the bathroom. Sometimes, have the tap running and silly things like that.
Yeah, Cold War tactics. Pavla, you've not been infected, right, by the Pegasus?
As far as I know.
Yeah, because you already said it's a non-interactive crack. So how did you find out that you were infected?
Well, I mean, when I was infected in 2019, I had absolutely no idea that my phone is being surveilled with Pegasus. My phone was not like overheating. The battery was, of course, running low, but it is an iPhone, so that's pretty regular with iPhones, that the battery is pretty shitty. So I was told 2 years after that I became a target because they identified my phone number in this leaked database. I think we didn't tell that the core of the investigation was a leaked database of more than 50,000 phone numbers. And these were really just phone numbers, so we had to identify the people behind those phone numbers. And we had another help from the coordinators of the project because they brought in Amnesty International, their tech team, who invented a method how to analyze, iPhones. And basically I had to do a backup of my phone, upload it to Amnesty's site or server, and they ran an analysis, and that analysis could show the exact dates down to a millisecond when some process or file associated with Pegasus was running on my phone. So I know the exact dates when someone got into my phone. I also know the amount of data that was downloaded from my phone, but I do not know what was actually accessed. I can only guess. The data was more than 100 megabytes in a 7 months period, which means that it was very likely not live streaming. So I usually take my phone, or I used to take my phone to the shower to listen to some podcast. I don't do that anymore, but it's very unlikely that they took pictures or videos. Probably it was just chat logs, messages, emails, as I said, Signal messages.
And have you, Pavla, ever been surveilled that you know of? Or do you suspect that you have been?
I have no idea, but I am really, really lame at, recognizing that something is happening or something is going on. So I still believe I haven't.
That's good. But
I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just stupid.
You should visit Hungary more often.
But did you run your phone through the software of the Amnesty International?
Different one that was monitoring the activities that my phone was doing when I was having it when actually I have this analysis on when I was working in Mexico on those stories.
Yeah. And is the research still going on, the Pegasus project, or is it finished?
It's pretty much finished, I believe. But it's a database. You don't know what kind of a data you are going to get in the future, and maybe there will be some crucial piece of information in this database or in this piece of information. So it's never finished, really.
And is there a research now on forgot the name of the other program, Predator? Is there also like a team that's researching that scandal?
I know that many journalists, usually from Greece, but also from other countries, are trying to find out who the other victims could be. So I think, yes, there is. It's not part of the Pegasus project. I think I published my last piece on Pegasus a couple of weeks ago. It was about a broker company that brought a broker company.
Yeah.
So it was basically an intermediary company that brought Pegasus to Hungary. So there are also sub-stories that are not actually related to the database, but about who operated the spyware, why, what was the legal background of it, and also we're following the developments. For example, what the European Parliament's PEGA committee will come up with.
Yeah. All right. Let's close this first conversation. You two, please remain seated. For the next part of the program, I would like to invite Stella Braam to talk with me on the stage. Stella Braam was monitored by the Dutch secret services for more than 30 years. And after requesting her file, she was shocked about the length of her file. And together with NRC, Dutch newspaper journalist Joep Domen, they went public to raise awareness on the surveillance of journalists. And after the publication of the article at the end of August, other journalists also requested a lot of their files. The interview will be conducted in Dutch, so I want to know who does not speak Dutch in the room. Yes, okay. For that reason, I made kind of an article this morning that will summarize a bit of the interview. Nadia will hand out the text. I will try to keep it as short as possible so that people will not get bored. Yes.
I will tell you later.
Yeah. We'll go to the stage. Nadia? Szabolcs.
Ja, ik ben alvast gaan klaarzitten. Ja, goed. Kunnen jullie mij verstaan?
The microphones, yeah.
Okay.
I will present you first in English. She's an investigative journalist for the investigative desk. You did research on the far-right Turkish organization, the Grey Wolves in the Netherlands, and power abuses in marginalized professions. I translated it. And you've been followed for 30 years by the AVD. Dus nu switchen we even naar Nederlands. Ja. Stella, welkom. Heel fijn dat je hier je verhaal wilde komen doen. Zoals ik al zei, je bent al... de NRC heeft het al gepubliceerd. Ja. Hoe ben je erachter gekomen dat je werd gevolgd door de AIVD en de MIVD?
Nou ja, het woord volgen, dat suggereert vaak... Ja, de mensen krijgen daar bepaalde associaties bij. Hè? Dus dat iemand zit op een bankje een krant te lezen... Nee, niet goed te verstaan. Beter zo. Associaties. Iemand zit op een bankje een krant te lezen... en er zit dan een gat in en is aan het observeren. Volgen heeft een hele hoop betekenis. Daar gaan we het zo over hebben. Wat ze dan met journalisten kunnen doen. Maar hoe ben ik erachter gekomen? Wel, ik heb mijn dossier opgevraagd. Ja. Elke burger, en dus ook elke journalist... heeft het recht om zijn eigen dossier... althans, als dat aanwezig is, op te vragen... En ik deed dat niet eens voor mijn lol. Het was een collega-journalist die mij erop attendeerde. En die zei, doe dat ook. Ik zei, nee, waarom zou ik? Laat het verleden los. Maar ze drong zo aan. En toen heb ik een maandje of 8 moeten wachten. En dat was natuurlijk lang over de termijn. Hè. Ze moeten eigenlijk binnen 3 maanden doen. En op een gegeven moment krijg je ook betaald. Het is best wel een leuk verdienmodel eigenlijk. Hè. Want je krijgt een dwangsom. En op een gegeven moment dan gaat de rechter dreigen met een verzwaarde dwangsom. En dan heb ik 1 dag een verzwaarde dwangsom gehad. En toen werd er aangebeld en daar stond de mailman, de postbode, met een heel dik pakket.
Ja, en wat dacht je toen je die hele dikke map zag?
Ja, nee, ik was sprakeloos.
Hoe dik was die map?
Nou ja, stel je maar voor, hè, een map van 300 pagina's, dat is best wel veel. En dan moet ik erbij zeggen dat het van buiten er heel netjes uitzag. Dus ik was eigenlijk ook wel aangenaam verrast door de netheid van zo'n ordner. Ik ben zelf een enorme sloddervos, hè. Dus ik denk, jeetje, zo'n nette ordner. Alle blaadjes zaten recht. En ja, het was ongelooflijk. Maar als je eenmaal in die map ging bladeren, wat ik met enige huiver deed, want ik dacht echt van dit is een soort doos van Pandora. Ik maakte me echt zorgen wat erin zou zitten. Dan zag je dat alles zat door elkaar heen. Hè? Want mijn dossier begint in 1986 en het eindigt tussen aanhalingstekens in 2017. Maar het is echt niet zo dat het allemaal netjes zo achter elkaar zat. Het zat allemaal door elkaar heen. Het was echt om gek van te worden.
En waarom zijn ze jouw informatie van jou bijgehouden?
Ja, ik heb dat nooit echt goed begrepen. Het begint in 1986. Nou, het is al eeuwenlang geleden natuurlijk. Ik begon net als journalist. En blijkbaar was waar ik werkte was verdacht. Dat was dus de vakbeweging FNV en daar dan de jongerenbeweging van. Blijkbaar was dat al verdacht. En dan werkte ik voor een blad voor de jongeren. Dat heette Klets. Dat was dan blijkbaar ook verdacht. Een van mijn eerste artikelen was een verslag van een demonstratie tegen de Centrumpartij. Dat was destijds extreem rechts. Dat was blijkbaar ook verdacht. En mijn achternaam was verdacht. Ik zal het even uitleggen. Er werd dus een opdracht gegeven voor een persoonsonderzoek. En daar stond bij wie is Stella Braam. En het was dus op basis van dat ik werkte voor de Klets. En dat artikel had geschreven, maar vooral ook op mijn achternaam. Uitgezocht moet worden of Stella Braam familie is van. En dan is het natuurlijk weggestreept. Maar iedereen die nog een beetje die tijd kent, van 1985, 86, weet dat er toen een beruchte Braam in Nederland was. Althans in de ogen van de AIVD. En het was Connie Braam. En die was heel actief voor de anti-apartheidsbeweging.
En je bent geen familie van?
Dat verklap ik niet. Want het leuke is dat de AIVD daar ook nooit antwoord op heeft gegeven of gevonden.
Ik heb dat artikel geschreven op basis van een gesprek dat we hadden gevoerd. En daar zei je van, de AIVD heeft gebruik gemaakt van bronnen. Ja. Wat voor bronnen waren dat? Dat weet ik dus niet. Maar eerst toch maar even, na 1986 is het een tijdje rustig. Dan ben ik blijkbaar toch een hele brave journalist. En opeens in 1993, dan veert die ambtenaren veren opeens op. En dan werk ik voor de Groene Amsterdammer en opzij. En dan zou je denken van, nou, wat is daar mis mee? Nou, blijkbaar alles. Want dan gaan ze op zoek naar criminele antecedenten. Ja. Heel vreemd. Nooit begrepen waarom. En die kunnen ze natuurlijk niet vinden. Maar wat was je vraag? Nou, je zei van ja, dus die bronnen. Dus de bronnen. Ja, dat is ook zo wat. Ja. Dus op een gegeven moment zit je in dat dossier te bladeren. En dan zie je een verslag van over Stella Braam. Voor wat het waard is. Dubbele punt. En dan pagina's die leeg zijn. Denk, wat is dat nou? En het kwam een paar keer voor. En het blijkt dus dat ze dus met mensen praten. We hebben het hier natuurlijk over de digitale surveillance. Maar het is natuurlijk ook, je hebt ook een hele fysieke surveillance, dat mensen met jou gaan praten. Ik heb geen idee wie die bronnen waren. Eén bron heeft de moeite genomen om naar een lezing te komen van Mehmet Ulger, wijle Mehmet Ulger en mij. Misschien moeten we even uitleggen dat het was allemaal in het kader van een boek. Ja. Dat we hadden geschreven over de grijze wolven, Turks nationalistisch rechts. Wij hielden samen een lezing op de school van journalistiek. En er was dus een bron of een medewerker of een agent, daar kom je daar nooit achter. En die had alles opgenomen. En die had ook de nodige observaties gedaan. Hè, van wat vertellen ze nou, wat vertellen ze na afloop. En hoe zag ze eruit? En ik vond het een compliment. Hij vond mij moe, maar niet verslagen. Dus dan denk ik van nou, dat is juist getypeerd. Hè? En je deed dus onderzoek in die tijd naar de grijze wolven. Waarom was dat voor de AIVD interessant? Nou ja, dat vroegen wij natuurlijk. En is daar ook nog iets uitgekomen? Ja, er waren honderden pagina's over de grijze wolven. En de toon werd steeds dubieuzer, maar dat gaan we dadelijk wel over hebben. Ja, we waren op de hoorzitting in het Hol van de Leeuw in Zoetermeer. En daar werd gezegd, ja, wij waren toevallig ook met die grijze wolven bezig. En dan kan dat zomaar, ja, dat snap ik wel, dan kan dat zomaar gebeuren dat je dan journalisten tegenkomt, enzovoort, enzovoort.
Maar goed, het feit was natuurlijk dat wij werden op dat moment ernstig bedreigd. Heel ernstig bedreigd door de grijze wolf. En dat blijkt ook wel, want er zit een document in die map. En daar staat op: de huurmoordenaar voor Braam en Ulger is gearresteerd. Nou, ja, dat is natuurlijk heel confronterend. Want ik wist dat wel, dat er iemand, zo'n hitman, was gestuurd. Maar als je dat zo zwart op wit ziet staan, dan stond er: hij is gearresteerd in Utrecht en zijn naam is, en dat was weggelakt en dat vond ik natuurlijk weer jammer. Maar eigenlijk zijn wij door die bedreigingen in het vizier gekomen van de AIVD, want hij moest op een gegeven moment toch iets van aangifte doen en melding maken. En ik kwam erachter dat alles wat wij daar vertelden, of als wij daar maar kwamen op het politiebureau, dat werd linearecht naar de AIVD gestuurd. Dat blijkt uit al die verslagen. En eenmaal werd zelfs een bericht onderschept door de AIVD. Dat tartte mijn fantasie. Ik denk, wauw, dit is heel spannend. De politie maakt iets en de AIVD onderschept dat. Maar waar hadden we het over?
Nou ja, ik wil even verder gaan op die hitman.
De hitman, ja.
Dus er is eigenlijk een moordaanslag op jou vereideld.
Ja.
Dus die surveillance was misschien ook wel goed in dit geval.
Ja, dat zou je denken. En dat was natuurlijk ook wel de hoop van de AIVD, dat als zo'n dossier dan komt, dat er een soort chocoladekop in de Telegraaf zou komen te staan. Hè, van AIVD redt de levens van 2 journalisten. Maar het is verre van dat. Als je goed door die map bladert, dan merk je op een gegeven moment dat ze echt helemaal niet meer geïnteresseerd zijn in onze veiligheid. Ik zal de details maar weglaten, maar uit alles blijkt dat ze ons liever zagen als zeg maar een soort van lokaas. Zo werd er eens de Turken, niet de Turken, pardon. Die grijze wolven die gingen natuurlijk die gingen actie ondernemen. En daar waren ook brave acties bij. Bijvoorbeeld in de Rode Hoed, hier de concurrent van de Bali, hadden ze een avond georganiseerd. En daar zat uiteraard, zou ik willen zeggen, een bron in de zaal die netjes aantekeningen maakte. En die noteert op een gegeven moment dat de sfeer ongelooflijk verhit raakt als mijn naam valt. Nou, dan zou je toch denken van, oh my god, weet je wel. Moeten we die mevrouw niet even gaan waarschuwen? Maar dat deden ze allemaal niet. Ja, ze werkten dus met bronnen. En ze gingen naar lezingen, wat ik al zei. Maar het meest vervelende is ook dat je dus ook blijkbaar in je eigen huis niet meer veilig bent. Omdat er in die jaren bij mij ik zal de details maar heel beetje voorzichtig doen. Er woonde bij mij in huis een wetenschapper met wie ik samen at en van alles vertelde. En via hem is bij een universiteit ook informatie over mij terechtgekomen. En dat was niet zomaar informatie. Dat was echt lasterlijke informatie. En het is misschien wel belangrijk dat naarmate zeg maar, de jaren vorderen in dat dossier van mij, ze noemen het overigens een inzagedossier, wordt de toon steeds verder van tegen mij. Ik ben niet van uit onverdachte hoek. Ik ben dus blijkbaar verdacht. Ja. Verdacht. En ik ben een deskundige tussen aanhalingstekens. Maar goed, misschien ga ik iets te snel, maar ik moet de tijd in de gaten houden. In die tijd woonde er dus iemand bij mij in huis. En die heeft een ontzettend lastelijk verhaal over mij verteld. Dat bij de BVD terecht is gekomen, de voorganger van de AIVD. En uit dat verhaal rijst een beeld als dat ik een vreselijk mens zou zijn. Wat ik natuurlijk ook wel ben, maar ook echt werkelijk totaal onbetrouwbaar. Ik zou een onderzoek hebben gestolen en daar zou ik stiekem een artikel van hebben geschreven. En ik word een soort van doorgedraaide grijze wolvenactiviste genoemd. Ik was werkelijk sprakeloos. Ik denk, ik heb met die man in huis gewoond en had hij dan ook toegang tot mijn computer? Wat is er dan nog meer over mij daar naartoe gegaan?
En wat is dan nu, een beetje om het een klein beetje af te ronden, wat zijn de gevolgen van deze ontdekking voor jou, van dit dossier? Hoe sta je nu in je werk?
Die zijn heel erg groot, omdat, wat ik al zei, het is bijna niet voorstelbaar dat ze in 2017, de laatste 5 jaar mag niet worden gegeven. Ja. Wat nota bene ook nog eens gearchiveerd eind 2018. Het is bijna niet te geloven dat ze zomaar zijn gestopt. Waarom zouden ze? Ze zijn al begonnen en als die trein eenmaal rijdt, is hij niet meer te stoppen. Dus wij wilden wel eens weten hoe dat zat. En we vroegen dan aan de AIVD op de hoorzitting van, sta ik nou nog onder AIVD-toezicht? Of hoe zit dat? Daar konden ze helaas niks over vertellen. Dat moest de minister maar doen. de minister van Binnenlandse Zaken. En de minister van Binnenlandse Zaken, die kreeg Kamervragen daarover. En die antwoordde, daar kan ik helemaal niks over zeggen. Dat laat ik aan de AIVD over. Dus ik bungel enorm. Ik vind het ook een hele rare opmerking van de minister van Binnenlandse Zaken. Waarom doe je dat nou tegen een journalist? Hè? Ik begrijp dat niet. Dus nu moeten we het aan laten komen op een kort geding. Om zeker te weten dat die surveillance, dat dossier van mij, dat gestopt is.
Ja.
Dus ik kan mijn werk eigenlijk niet doen.
Nee. Want je kan je bronnen niet beschermen.
Ik kan niet garanderen. Nee.
Hoe word je gecompenseerd door de AIVD?
Ja, hoe word je
Financieel? Financieel? Ja. Nou, dat hoop ik. Ik hoop dat de penningmeester meekijkt online. Nou, ja, ik wil daar wel natuurlijk een schadevergoeding voor hebben. Maar het is nog een beetje vroeg. En die procedures duren ontzettend lang, heb ik begrepen. Maar voor die tijd dat ik inderdaad mijn werk niet fatsoenlijk kan doen. Ja. Maar goed, rond die tijd mag je wat geld van me lenen. Ja.
Oké, Stella. Thank you very much for this short
I'm sorry
interview.
it was in Dutch.
And
you are.
Can I have a very warm applause for Stella Braam?
Dankjewel.
Yes, and before we're going to watch another short clip, I would first like to invite Tom Keunen from Free Press Unlimited. He works there as a head of security, where he focuses on and offline security. Tom, please take a seat. Can you just in 2 minutes tell us what does your work entail?
Oh, geez. 2 minutes. So I'm the head of security for Free Press Unlimited. Free Press Unlimited is a Dutch press freedom organization. We work internationally. We work with around 120 partners in 54 countries. And we support independent media. And we support independent media where we think it's needed. My work there is basically bringing together physical security, digital security, staff well-being, looking at the context.
All right,
so
that was
the big picture, so to say.
That was 1 minute. Really.
Actually, 30 seconds.
Oh, okay, nice. Well, then I would like to see a short clip of a documentary you made, I think, or is it about you?
No, I'm just talking head there. It's not even about me. It's about Jano Kuciak. And
we want to get into that.
By someone else.
Yeah. All right. Then can I please see the short clip of the killing of a journalist? I think you need to tap one more.
Niečo zlé je pod povrchom, niečo zlé je v samých základoch nášho štátu.
We knew that the country is corrupted. The judges, the police,
Supreme Court, Constitutional Court, all these positions were completely in hands of this mafia type of system that these oligarchs created. And the murder of Jan Kuciak and Martina Kušnírova was the breaking point, when we realized, okay, now they are ready even to kill.
V máji roku 2018, 5. mája má být svatba. A město svatby byl pohřeb.
I believe 100% Marian Kočner ordered the murder of Jan Kuciak.
Jan Kuciak wrote extensively about his economic criminal activity.
Lebo veľmi píšeš o veľmi zlých ľudí a ja sa veľmi bojím o teba.
Ale môžete si byť istí, že začnem sa vám osobne, začnem pán Kuciak špeciálne venovať.
A to je vražka?
No lebo vám to hovorím, pokojne vám to hovorím, začnem sa venovať špeciálne. Vám, vašej osobe, vašej matke, vašmu osobe a vašej súrode. Ako náhle
Som hrdý na svojich kolegov novinárov a novinárky, ktorí Janov odkaz pochopili. Ale ani tí najodvážnejší novinári nie sú sami spasiteľmi demokracie.
Then I received a copy of the police investigation file, including the cell phones and computers of Marian Kočner.
Here are the devices from the shooter, the driver, the middleman. We have SIM cards, tablets, computers.
Tens of thousands of messages.
The judge is asking Kočner how he should rule. That's how it works.
We could prove the police is corrupted, the judges are corrupted. It was all there. This data could totally shake Slovakia.
Yeah, very moving story. So, just a quick recap: your a colleague of yours and a friend, I think, Jan Kuciak, was killed, and his partner. What were they investigating? It's already a bit in the video, but just.
Martina was not a journalist, even though she was the first one who was reading Jano's stories. But when Jano was murdered, we were working on a story that was connecting then Prime Minister of Slovakia with the most powerful Italian mafia, 'Ndrangheta. It's from Calabria.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I went to police protection program, and but only later it showed up. Jano was not killed by Italian mafia, but by Slovak businessmen.
Yeah, and even after his murder, you continued to the investigation, and in the end, the government of Slovakia fell because of this case, right? How hard was this to uncover, and what were the risks involved when you were doing this story?
It started differently. At the beginning, I just wanted to know and understand what happened, why Jano was killed, how, who ordered it. Like, really, the basic information. It's a case of Sabi, who also needs to know what and why. And we didn't trust the police that they will independently investigate the murder. So we decided we are going to investigate the murder, and we went to Velká Mača, what is the place where Jano was living and where he was killed, and we conducted hours of interviews and gathered CCTV footage, and but we didn't get, far. We talked to the parents, so we got access to some of the information, and after about a year we were able to reconstruct how Jano and Martina were killed. And it was probably the most difficult story I wrote in my life, because it was really, when you listen again and again how your friend and close colleague was murdered, shot, and what it did to his body and so on. It's not easy work. And the next year I received the police investigation file, including all the annexes, and then it really started to be interesting. And we understood that it was originally unsorted. It was 70 terabytes of data, what is a lot. Panama Papers, it was 4.5 terabytes of data, so much more. And it took OCCRP tech team 2 months only to sort out the data to make it accessible to journalists, so we don't need to type in query in a command line to get to the information, but really what you saw there, just to click on the file and understand what's in there. And then I talked to my friend and colleague, Slovak journalist and writer these days, Arpad Šoltes, and we talk a lot about it, and we decided that we are just going to be coordinators of the team composed of different media from Slovakia, of a journalist we trust, and we decided that we need all the media possible that are unbiased to work on those stories, because it's too big just for us. So we created this team, and there were people from TVs, there were people from dailies, weeklies, but from tabloids as well.
Yeah.
And they provided excellent paparazzis that we needed in one story. So it really worked well, and we were actually able to finish all the stories Jano started, but was never able to finish, because we all felt motivated, and we all felt that, if we would just, shut down any journalistic investigative activities, then the guy who ordered the murder would win, because it would be a strong message. You can just kill the story by killing a journalist, and that's it, So we needed to send out another message, and that was, if you are going to kill a journalist, 20 other journalists would pick up the stories, and they will be highly motivated to do whatever possible to finish the stories.
And did you and your colleagues at that time received any threats?
Yeah, sure. A lot.
Did you feel unsafe at that time?
That's actually a benefit of foreign journalists. I'm not living in Slovakia, so unlike my other colleagues, I was able to go home and close the doors and feel safe.
Yeah.
But yes, they were threatened. We were all threatened, and it was also one of the reasons it was me who received the copy of the data, because it was clear that if the former parties that lost and took down the system would regain the power, they would go after each journalist who touched the data.
Yeah.
So the source decided that the copy of the data must be somewhere else, out of Slovakia.
Yeah. And is this prime minister still a politician? Is he running again for?
He's member of a parliament. He is deputy. Is leader of recently most powerful political party, and probably in a year they will be back at power.
So then the journalists are under threat.
Yes.
Yeah. And Tom, is this something you recognize throughout Europe? Is this a trend that journalists are being threatened, and do you see that at Free Press Unlimited?
Well, unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, we see. I mean, we have Hungary, of course, where it's very easy to pick at, because Mr. Orban is a very easy pickings on that. But we also see countries like Slovakia, we see Poland, where decisions are being made. But I also would like to say we can see it even in the Netherlands. We see it in the Netherlands, where the press is no longer free to collect the stories that they want to collect. Luckily, we have some support mechanisms in countries like the Netherlands. We have the project called Persvrijheid, which is assisting journalists in doing their work, and they're working together with the police. But in a lot of the countries that we talk about, I mean, going to the police might actually heighten the risk that you're running.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And what can journalists do to protect themselves at the moment? Yeah.
You can, live in a bunker. Don't use phone and internet. I have a colleague who calls it work-life balance. Kind of twisted in this regard for journalists. It's like you have a life to live, and you need to consider what amount of a risk you are willing to take to live a life. Not to really live in a fear, and then you need to find a balance.
And how's this balance in your life?
Doing well. I don't know. I'm the lucky one, I'm still alive. There's no formal prosecution of me. The threats I'm receiving are usually bearable. So I can come home and lock the doors and watch Netflix and survive, be happy.
And Tom, regarding digital threats, what are the latest trends and what worries you the most at the time?
What worries myself the most is people who say I have nothing to hide, or the people that say they know everything already. So basically the fatalism, not taking steps. What we do see, because of programs like Pegasus and other measures is that they do not know everything. Otherwise, they would not have the need to deploy such tactics. So yes, I'm going to be the eternal optimist, and yes, I do believe that we can take steps to mitigate certain risks. Will that probably affect the work-life balance? Unfortunately, yes. So we might have to reconsider how we do certain things. For instance, if we know that phones are so susceptible to being hacked, should we still have a phone?
What can you do without a phone?
I think that is a question that the journalists have to ask when they start a project. Are we going to use our mobile devices during the course of this project?
And dumb phones?
Sometimes it might be necessary to meet at a park bench or to have the tap brother running.
Yeah. And how about using dumb phones?
Unfortunately, those dumb phones only look dumb. They're so high-tech these days even the simple Nokia is basically running something called KaiOS, which is the operating system, which is basically a slimmed-down version of Android. So the base layer is still the same. It might look dumb, but it's everything but.
Yeah, so still something like Pegasus could enter that phone.
I cannot comment on that because I don't know any KaiOS infected devices. But I do believe that we, as users of the technology, have our own responsibility as well. We need to be aware of the risks that we are running. Yes, companies need to take steps as well. And as companies like Meta are obviously showing that they are doing everything they can to protect the user, I think it's still up to the individual to indeed take steps to protect themselves. And by the way, that was a cynical remark about Meta.
Szabolcs, do you ever feel that the price you have to pay personally for your journalism is too high?
No.
It's worth it?
Yes, and actually, like my surveillance, I mean, it's like minor. I don't know how to phrase it. Like it's a minor thing compared to what happened to those people in Mexico, for example, or even what happened to Jan Kuciak. I mean, he was like physically surveilled before the murder, when the
by people from Secret Service.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, every murder is usually the consequence of some kind of surveillance. For example, when Jano was killed, I was in the U.S. studying, and I was really shocked. And one of the main takeaways for me was that, like, who am I to be afraid to continue doing my work when, you know, there are so brave journalists that even pay the ultimate price for doing their job. So in a way, I think Jano's murder did give a huge motivation boost, not just to Slovak journalists or Czech journalists, but also to the whole journalistic community. And I think with the Pegasus case, it's, at least for me, it was the same. I mean, I was part of the project. I was also part of the victim pool. But knowing that there were journalists in Mexico, there was a journalist in 2017 in Mexico who was surveilled with Pegasus. Then he was gunned down at some car wash a couple of weeks later. So these things do make me very angry, and these things help me keep going.
Yeah, but the theme of this year's Vrijheidsfestival is against the power, and how important is the role of journalists in going against the power?
Essential, absolutely essential. No, I'm a journalist, so probably ask someone else this question, okay?
Tom.
I'm not a journalist, but for me, journalism is the fourth estate. It is basically the pillar of society that will question democracy. And we need to be able to ask questions. Because when you can't ask questions, the answers will never come. And then people will go on YouTube and Twitter for their news.
That's happening right now.
Exactly. So we need independent journalists that can do their work in freedom and freedom of fear.
Yeah. And going to YouTube or Twitter for your news, do you regard that as a digital threat?
Misinformation, disinformation is certainly a threat, and it's actively being exploited. For instance, in the US, if you listen to what Mr. Trump has to say, what he thinks that should happen to journalists that disclose things, he wants to put them in jail and have them sexually assaulted, in case you didn't hear that story this week. But if you have a presidential candidate who's openly saying that, I mean, that sends a chilling effect. And these two people here sitting at the table are brave. I mean, they're incredibly brave, but at the same time, we need to create a safe working environment for those people and for the future generation of journalists, because self-censorship is killing.
Did you ever self-censor?
No.
Or do you know colleagues who do?
Yes. But not because of the fear, but because of the money. You know, those who still work in the media of our former prime minister, they became the tool of his vision of the world, and they just don't see it as a problem.
To self-censor?
Yeah, they just, you know, want to make the owner happy, so they, you know, pick up the topics that would please Andrej Babiš, and they frame the stories the way that it would please Andrej Babiš. So that's self-censorship, or maybe self-cynicism.
I would like to ask one question to an honorable guest here in the audience, Tegen, who is part of the European Parliament and is also working on this Pegasus committee. Thijs, how do you see the role of the European Union in safeguarding the freedom of press? And yeah, the mic is coming towards you.
Whoa. Thank you so much. Yes, well, I think press freedom is for two reasons a cornerstone of democracy. Because when something is wrong with democracy or with the rule of law, it mostly has started with some kind of curbing of press freedom. So it's an early warning signal for problems with the rule of law and democracy. We have seen that in many EU member states, unfortunately, but also outside the EU, of course. And secondly, when there is some autocrat or other governments that have fear for the questions of journalists, the first thing they are starting to do to get control is to curb journalism and the freedom of press. So on two sides, I think it's a cornerstone of democracy and the values that we as European Union cherish so much. I'm indeed a member of the inquiry committee and we go to Cyprus and Greece next week, and we will hopefully get some more facts on the table of the still developing case in Greece, for example, which is like changing and getting more revelations by the day. So that's what we're trying to work on, and we will keep on fighting for this, regardless the member states that will indeed need to come together if we want to change things. But we will certainly come up with a report with some tough recommendations.
And also here in the Netherlands, and we see attacks on journalists and on democracy. What is there? What should politics do? How can we stop this negative trend from evolving even further? And maybe a question for everyone, but please go first.
I'm very happy with organizations like Press Freedom Unlimited and other NGOs that are tirelessly working not only inside the EU but also outside the EU. And in the Netherlands, we have to preserve and be careful with our democracy, because I think, and that is an ironic benefit of what we are experiencing now in the last 9 months with the war in Ukraine, that we hopefully lose the naivety that things that happened in Hungary, that happened in Slovenia, that are happening in Greece, the spying on a colleague of mine in the European Parliament who is the opposition leader in Greece, that these things can also happen in other member states, maybe are already happening in other member states. And I think that if we realize that we should not be naive about that, that is the beginning of the defense that we need to do collectively. We need to defend the vulnerable democracy and the rule of law that we have and that we cherish so much.
Szabolcs, you want to say something?
No.
Okay, because you looked like you wanted to say something. If we look at the situation in Hungary, how can we defend democracy there, or what should happen now?
Actually, I want to say something because regarding that and the Netherlands, I mean, I don't want to say out names, but there are certain Dutch politicians who are in very good relationship with our prime minister and his circles. And I think that maybe their attitude towards press freedom is pretty similar. And if they ever come to power, probably they will try to copy what's been going on in Hungary. I think that one main takeaway of the whole Pegasus case is that, Hungary is this exotic, faraway Eastern European country with a strange leader, and a lot of people in Western Europe think that this is none of our concern. This is not our country. This is like, some troubled uncle or some faraway distant relative that's doing crazy things. But in the end, if you let these people continue what they're doing, they're gonna spoil the rest of the family. And the playbook that was invented in Hungary is already being copied in Poland and in other countries. So it can have very serious consequences if there are no consequences to, for example, surveilling journalists in an EU member state.
Is there anything you would like to add? No? Tom?
Actually, yes. Thank you very much for your kind words. But I do believe that there's a task for Brussels as well. If I look at what the European Commission, for instance, is asking about end-to-end encryption, where they want to weaken the encryption schemes being used. And they try to with various excuses why. Now they found an excuse, we need to protect our children. That seems to be working, because as soon as you object to it, they put you in a certain role. I think it's also up to the politicians to take a stand there and go like, tools like Pegasus have no place in our society. I mean, this is not even a dual-use tool. This is a single attack tool. And it's peculiar that once again, a tool that was developed maybe with the best intentions to catch the bad guys, it's the journalists that end up on the hit list. So this is also something where I think that the European can make a stronger stand. The fact that even the President of the United States disagreed with buying the NSO group, that is saying something. If even he thinks that buying the NSO group and making it American is a bridge too far, why do we still allow organizations or entities like NSO group to operate? Just a question.
Are there any questions from the audience? Yeah, a few. There's there.
One of the things I find really important is the contrast between this event, which emphasizes independence, and an event that I went to earlier at Bali with a CNN reporter. And in the framing of news and journalism, it's as a viewer, a consumer of what is shared, there is not a strong, clear divergence yet, I think, for the consumer between the important role that independent journalism plays and what people are fed or what people buy inadvertently through their Zego, whatever cable. So as independent journalists, and if we could just park the idea of objectivity for a moment, reality here, what role do you have to play in making sure that those of us who are outside your profession really understand the necessity of independence, that this is not something that is a product to be consumed?
We definitely fail in this, in explaining not only, our stories better, probably, but explaining why we matter. It's not only independence, it's also, not using those tiny tools, how to frame the story, who to pick to respond, to support what we are trying to say. And it's actually about doing quality journalism. But I believe that at some point people would understand, if they will be put into the position of making difficult decision, they would turn to quality journalism instead of, like tabloids and kittens. If they would, I don't know, if they are going to make a deal with another company that's, like really big money for them at least, that they would do at least basic due diligence on the company, and they will trust those media who are kind of verified or considered to be independent and trusted, and not, PR media. So I hope that, that there is still somewhere understanding of the value of quality journalism. I don't know.
Was that an answer to your question?
Yeah, definitely an answer, but I think there's a lot of... I would say that I'm from the US, you can tell. We don't have independent media. I mean, we can say that we do, but there's no way that the stories that you're able to put out there can go up against just even MSNBC, right, which claims to be on the left or progressive. I mean, these are powerful for-profits. They are everywhere. So to me, it's an act of social justice just to be an independent journalist. And so where is your responsibility to that aspect of providing that social justice?
We are not here to provide social justice. We are here to inform people. And, they should understand it's them to provide who should provide or stand up for social justice. Our role is different. The expectations are probably higher on the journalist than what we actually can do. My goal is to provide information and to kill this kind of alibism, like we didn't know. We want to provide the information to the people who are searching for the information, and that's it. I don't wake up in the morning, hey, today I'm going to take down the government. No, it's not. I wake up in the morning and I'm going to work on a story and provide information, and that's it.
Any other question in the audience?
Yeah, I up till now I understood that the issue was the journalists who didn't know that they were followed by the Secret Service a long time, or they don't even know. And one of the questions in the beginning I had in my head was, how can you know that you are being followed? Well, the answer was already that we don't know. But 1 or 2 weeks ago, there was a program on the Dutch radio, Argos. It was about journalism and the Dutch Secret Service. And this was not about being followed without knowing that you were followed. But one of the journalists said that more than half of the journalists he knew, and it was quite a number, was approached by the Dutch Secret Service to act as an informant. So he said that in the beginning he was surprised and at the same time even flattered to being approached by the Dutch Secret Service. And then at the same time, they were shocked that the Dutch Secret Service was approaching these journalists because it was also putting them into jeopardy because of their work. So how are journalists, and I don't know in Slovakia or in Hungary how these things are working, but how do you deal with that if the Secret Service is approaching you to be an informant? And it's not even only with journalists, but also other people who have some delicate jobs.
Oops. Hopefully I didn't destroy the mic. I have a very good friend, one of my best friends, a very good Hungarian investigative journalist who was pressured to cooperate with the Hungarian counterintelligence back in late 2015. They tried to blackmail him into cooperating and revealing his sources. And he declined. He did pay a personal price for that, and this is like the most serious breach that I experienced throughout my career. But the main takeaway is that you can always say no, even in Hungary, and I guess in the Netherlands that probably, or at least I hope that it's not the way how Dutch journalists are being approached, that look, we have some material on you and we're going to publish it if you don't reveal your sources. But usually in the case of most countries, I think with the help of technological surveillance, you don't even need to recruit a journalist. It's much easier just to plant something on the phone, because you have access to exact same information that he or she has without his or her knowledge. So there's no need for recruiting someone these days. And I guess in the 80s and in the 90s it was much different.
Thank you. Yeah, there's another question there.
Hi, my name is Karin Eijkman. I'm with the Netherlands Human Rights Institute. Yeah, my name is Karin Eijkman. I'm with the Netherlands Human Rights Institute, and this year we published about participating safe and secure in the Dutch public debate. So here's one of my questions. We're talking a lot about the Secret Service, but there are also a lot of other problems with intimidation and aggressions to journalists, but also other media actors. And I was interested in one of our recommendations was related to this kind of strategic litigation against journalists. And I'm very interested in your perspective on these. They're called slaps, but these lawsuits that people are using to kill dissent or journalism. So I'm kind of curious about your perspective on that, but also about threats, intimidation of people just participating in the public debate, which is also a big challenge in the Netherlands.
Maybe a short explanation of slaps.
Yeah, so what people do is they take journalists to court to silence them. It's very expensive. And it's something that I'm sure in the European Union is also addressed, but it's quite another way to intimidate free speech or free expression, because most people can't afford. I know, for instance, it happens in Malta, but what we want is more specific legislation against that, because we feel it's another way to control dissent. But maybe, I don't know, you could share a little bit more about it, but I don't know if it's clear.
It's one of the benefits of Brexit, that we can't be sued now in London. So, hooray. Because in London, those were the worst litigations with full disclosure, when actually the lawyers of the one who is suing you would gain full access to your computer and cell phone, and then they will find a message where you say, like, he's a real idiot, he's not answering, and then you are biased and you will lose the litigation. But yes, it's used quite often, and those who are usually using SLAP, what stands for Strategic Litigation something, they know exactly in which country they should take you to the court, and it's expensive, it's tiring, it's paralyzing quite often, because you need to dedicate a lot of power and time to collect the evidence that you did your best job. And yes, it's happening a lot.
It's strategic lawsuits against public participation. I forget it all the time too, but the slaps. Yeah.
There's a question in the back.
I have a question actually about the role of the State of Israel, because Pegasus can be distributed without permission from the Ministry of Defense in Israel. And actually my question is, in what kind of way can we do something about that? Because I saw it with the Abraham Accords. A lot of the Abraham Accords went through because of them distributing Pegasus to Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, for example. So as a partner of the EU, who we have diplomacy relations with, how can we work on that?
Who was your question?
Sorry? Well, I mean, we did investigate also. I mean, journalists working on the Pegasus project did write extensively on the relationship between NSO Group and the State of Israel and the Israeli intelligence apparatus. And I think these articles were pretty instrumental in highlighting the role that the Israeli, well, it's not even just the state, but actually it was Benjamin Netanyahu's government that was really putting a lot of support behind the Israeli cyber defense industry, a lot of state money, a lot of state support, and also through personal connections. It seems that, as you mentioned, that Pegasus was also used as a tool in Israeli diplomacy. And yes, there's this strange coincidence that those countries that were one of the worst abusers of Pegasus happened to be the ones that signed the Abraham Accord and created diplomatic relationship with Israel. I can fully understand what's the Israeli interest there. The problem here is that Israel is not a member of the European Union. You cannot really sue them, although I myself I'm suing the State of Israel because of that purchase. And I also have to tell that I was told that this is mostly about trying to create some more publicity so that the politics in Israel will follow up on this issue and put political pressure on the Israeli leadership. What did happen is that actually the Israeli Ministry of Defense threw out some countries from the so-called white list. There was a list of countries that have almost automatic approval for the export of such technology, and there were some countries kicked out. So this list was a little bit shortened. So there are already things happening due to the publicity. I don't know what the EU's role is here. I know that the role of the journalist is exactly the same as in other countries. We just uncover, what kind of abuses there are, and we hope that the public will react. But as Pavla said previously, it is not our job to be involved in activism and demand stuff from states. I'm in a dual role here, so I'm suing Israel as a private citizen who was the victim of the surveillance, not as a journalist.
There's room for one short question, and if not, we close this meeting. Is there one short question? No? Then I would like a very warm welcome, applause for my guests, Tom Keunen, Pavla Holcová, and Szabolcs Panyi, and Stella Braam.